Life in the Trenches, a War of Movement. The Great War, a phrase coined even before it had begun, was expected to be a relatively short affair, and as with most wars, one of great movement. The First World War was typified, however, by its lack of movement. The years of stalemate exemplified on the Western Front from autumn 1914 until spring 1918. Now that there was not movement at all on the Western Front during 1914 and 1918, the war began dramatically with sweeping advances by the Germans through Belgium and France en route for Paris. However, stalemate and trench warfare soon became the norm. So in the context of this passage, what does stalemate mean? Stalemate basically means that nobody's winning. Okay, that all these battles are occurring and they're basically draws and nobody's gaining anything and nobody's really advancing, and the trenches kind of symbolize this stalemate here. Daily death in the trenches. Death was a constant companion to those serving in the line, even when no raid or attack was launched or defended against. In busy sectors, the constant shell fire directed by the enemy brought random death where victims were lounging in a trench or lying in dugouts. Many men were buried alive as a consequence of such large shell bursts. Similarly, novices were cautioned against their natural inclination to peer over the parapet of the trench into no man's land. Many men died on the first day in the trenches from a precisely aimed sniper's bullet. Estimates show that up to one-third of Allied casualties on the Western Front were actually sustained in the trenches. Aside from enemy injuries, disease wrought a heavy toll. So question 2 asks, why do you think the death toll was so high in the trenches? This has to do with, one, there's nowhere to go. So leaving the trench exposed you to sniper fire. And then inside the trenches are filled with disease. So a lot of soldiers just die because the conditions are so unsanitary in the trenches. Rat infestation. It's my favorite paragraph. Rats in the millions infested trenches. Rats gorged themselves on human remains, grotesquely disfigured dead bodies by eating their eyes and liver. Rats feasted on corpses so frequently that many rats grew to be the size of cats. Soldiers were maddened and afraid of these rats, which often scampered across their faces in the dark. Men attempted to rid the trenches of rats by various methods, by gunfire, by bayonets, and even by clubbing them to death. It was useless, however. A single rat couple could produce up to 900 offspring in a year, spreading infection and contaminating food. The rat problem remained for the duration of the war, although many veteran soldiers swore that rats sensed impending heavy enemy shell fire and consequently disappeared. So question 3 asks, why are the trenches so appealing to rats? Simply because it was a food source. They could go into these things and there'd be dead bodies. There'd be things for them to eat. And it was very appealing to them. Frogs, lice, and trench foot. Rats were by no means the only source of infection and nuisance. Lice were a never-ending problem, breeding in the seams of filthy clothing and causing men to itch unceasingly. Even when clothing was periodically washed and deluged, lice eggs invariably remained hidden in the seams, within a few hours of the clothes being reworn. The body heat generated would cause the eggs to hatch. Lice caused trench fever, a particularly painful disease that began suddenly with severe pain followed by high fever. Recovery away from the trenches took up to 12 weeks. Lice were not actually identified as the culprit of trench fever until 1918. Frogs by the score were found in shell holes covered in water. They were also found in the bases of trenches. Slugs and horned beetles crowded the sides of the trench. Many men chose to shave their heads entirely to avoid another common scourge, nits. Trench foot was another medical condition peculiar to trench life. It was a fungal infection of the feet caused by cold, wet, and unsanitary trench conditions. It could turn into gangrene and result in amputation. So question 4 asks, why did soldiers develop these other medical conditions in the trenches? Because the trenches were filthy. Okay? Their clothes were filthy. They didn't have access to showers and fresh water. And the food they ate wasn't healthy, wasn't generally properly cooked. Alright? To Patrolling no man's land. Patrols were often be sent out into no man's land. Some men would be tasked with repairing or adding barbed wire to the front line. Others, however, would go out to assigned listening posts, hoping to pick up valuable information from the enemy lines. Sometimes enemy patrols would meet in no man's land. There they were faced with the option of hurrying on their separate ways or else engaging in hand-to-hand fighting. They could not afford to use their handguns while patrolling in no man's land for the fear of the machine gun fire would inevitably attract all members of the patrol. So, excuse me, why was no man's land so dangerous? There's nowhere to hide. Alright? Snipers were ready to fire. People out in no man's land were generally in a desperate situation. If they used their actual handguns, they risked those machine guns. And if you remember from the PowerPoint the other day, machine guns weren't being carried, but they were being set up. All right. And the smell. Finally, no overview of trench life could avoid the aspect that instantly struck visitors to the lines. The appealing reek given off by numerous conflicting sources. Rotting carcasses lay around in the thousands. Overflowing toilets similarly gave off a most offensive stench. Men who hadn't had a bath in weeks or months reeked of dried sweat. Their feet were generally accepted to give off the worst odor. Trenches were also smell of cleaners or chloride used to starve off the constant threat of disease and infection. Add to this the smell of gunpowder, the lingering odor of poison gas, rotting sandbags, stagnant mud, cigarette smoke, and cooking food, yet none grew used to it, while it thoroughly overcame first-time users to the front. So why did the trenches smell so bad? You have dead bodies, you have men who haven't showered, you have overflowing or lack of toilets, you have just the cleaners that they're dumping in the trenches just to try to make it smell good. You have odor of poison gas, you have rotten sandbags, you have the smell of mud, cigarette smoke, and cooking food. Alright?